Elton John's life has always been as flamboyant, dramatic, and emotionally charged as the music he creates. Behind the glittery costumes, hit records, and legendary performances lies a man who has lived through extraordinary highs and devastating lows. While the world knows him as the larger-than-life superstar who defined decades of pop culture, there's one chapter of his personal history that remains one of the most complicated and painful: his short-lived first marriage to Renate Blauel. For Elton, the 1980s were a turbulent mix of superstardom, personal struggles, and a desperate attempt to find a sense of normalcy. This attempt culminated in a marriage that even he now openly describes as disastrous, a union driven not by love in the truest sense, but by confusion, denial, and societal pressure. Years later, Elton has publicly reflected on what led him into that marriage, how it unraveled, and the impact it had on both him and Renate. His words are not just an admission of past mistakes, but also an attempt at reconciliation with the woman who shared such a vulnerable and painful part of his life story. By the early 1980s, Elton John was already a global superstar. He had conquered the charts throughout the 1970s with iconic albums like Goodbye Yellow Brick Road and unforgettable singles such as Your Song and Rocket Man. On the outside, he appeared to be living a dream life, touring the world, performing to sold-out arenas, and amassing wealth and fame that most could only imagine. Yet beneath the dazzling stage persona, Elton was struggling with his identity, his mental health, and his sexuality. In those days, being openly gay in the music industry wasn't embraced the way it is now. Though Elton had come out as bisexual in a 1976 interview with Rolling Stone, the admission was met with skepticism and backlash, and he found himself caught between public perception and his true feelings. As a man raised in an era when homosexuality was still stigmatized, Elton felt an enormous weight of expectation pressing down on him. He longed for stability, normality, and acceptance in a world that judged him for his differences. Enter Renate Blauel, a German-born sound engineer who had worked on several of Elton's recording sessions. Renate was known to be intelligent, discreet, and highly professional. She wasn't dazzled by Elton's fame the way many others were, and that was part of her appeal to him. In Renate, Elton saw a calm and steady presence, someone outside of the whirlwind of celebrity who seemed to offer him the grounding he desperately sought. The two grew close during the making of his album Too Low for Zero in 1983. For Elton, the companionship and connection he felt with Renate seemed like a lifeline, an opportunity to create a conventional family life, to prove, to himself and to the world, that he could be normal. He had convinced himself that if he got married, perhaps he could bury his feelings of attraction to men and build a traditional future. In February 1984, the world was stunned when Elton John announced that he was marrying Renate in Sydney, Australia. The wedding was lavish, held on Valentine's Day, and attended by friends and family in a blaze of media attention. Elton, dressed in a white suit, looked every bit the giddy groom. To outsiders, it seemed like a romantic fairy tale, a surprise twist in the life of a superstar. But the reality was far more complicated. Elton later admitted that his decision to marry Renate was rushed and misguided, an impulsive attempt to cover up his internal struggles. In interviews, he has confessed that he loved Renate, but not in the way a husband should love a wife. Deep down, he knew he was gay, but at the time, he thought marriage might cure him, or at least silence the internal conflict that tormented him. Almost from the start, cracks began to show in the marriage. Elton's lifestyle was anything but quiet or domestic. He was touring constantly, consumed by his career, and also battling personal demons, including struggles with substance abuse. The pressures of fame, coupled with his unresolved identity crisis, created an environment in which a healthy marriage was nearly impossible. For Renate, the marriage was equally difficult. She had entered into a union with one of the most famous men in the world, only to realize that he could never truly give her the kind of love and partnership she deserved. Though she was a private person who shunned the spotlight, her life was suddenly under constant scrutiny, with tabloids speculating about their relationship and Elton's sexuality. Behind closed doors, Elton was sinking deeper into despair. He later described the marriage as a time when he felt like he was living a lie, torn between the life he wanted to build with Renate and the truth of who he really was. After just 4 years, the marriage came to an end. In 1988, Elton and Renate quietly divorced, citing irreconcilable differences. The separation was amicable on the surface, but for both of them, it left deep scars. For Elton, the divorce marked the moment when he could no longer deny his true self. He finally came to terms with his sexuality and began living openly as a gay man. He later admitted that marrying Renate had been unfair to her, an act of selfish desperation that hurt them both. For Renate, the end of the marriage was devastating. She had genuinely cared for Elton, and the collapse of their relationship left her heartbroken. After the divorce, she retreated from the public eye, moving back to Germany and living a life of privacy. Unlike Elton, who remained in the spotlight, Renate chose silence, rarely speaking about her time with him. Decades later, Elton has repeatedly reflected on his marriage to Renate with a mixture of regret and compassion. In interviews and in his autobiography, Me, he admitted that marrying her was one of the biggest mistakes of his life, not because of who she was, but because of the dishonesty underlying the decision. He has described Renate as a wonderful woman, kind and understanding, who did not deserve to be put through the pain of their doomed union. Elton has expressed his hope that Renate has found peace and happiness away from the chaos of his world. In one particularly heartfelt admission, he said, "I wanted more than anything to be a good husband, but I couldn't. I was lying to myself and I was lying to her, and that was not fair." His reflections are not bitter but remorseful, a recognition of how deeply his actions affected another person's life. In more recent years, Elton has gone beyond reflection and directly addressed his ex-wife. During the release of his autobiography, he issued a public statement expressing regret for the hurt he caused her. He acknowledged that while their marriage was doomed from the start, Renate was blameless and deserved nothing but respect. When the film Rocketman was released in 2019, Renate briefly resurfaced in the media, concerned about how their marriage would be portrayed. She even took legal action against Elton, worried that the film might expose too many details about her life. The matter was settled privately, with Elton once again expressing his desire not to cause her pain. He reiterated that he wished her well and hoped she could live free from the shadows of their past. This moment demonstrated Elton's ongoing awareness of the consequences of his choices. Despite decades having passed since their divorce, he still feels a sense of responsibility for the turmoil their marriage caused. Elton John's disastrous first marriage remains one of the most significant personal lessons of his life. It taught him the dangers of denying his true self and the collateral damage that can result from living a lie. His marriage to Renate was not born out of malice but out of confusion and fear. Yet it still inflicted pain on someone he cared about. The contrast between that marriage and his later relationship with David Furnish, whom he married in 2014 after years together, could not be greater. With David, Elton has found the genuine love, partnership, and family life that he once thought he could only achieve through denial. Their marriage, built on honesty and mutual respect, is proof that embracing authenticity leads to true happiness. Elton often speaks about how grateful he is to live in a time when he can be open about his sexuality and raise a family without fear of judgment. He has used his platform to advocate for LGBTQ+ rights, perhaps driven in part by the painful memory of his marriage to Renate and the price he paid for hiding who he really was. Today, Elton John is not just celebrated as one of the greatest musicians of all time, but also as someone who has lived through extraordinary personal evolution. His willingness to openly discuss his mistakes, including his disastrous first marriage, has made him more relatable to fans who see him not just as a superstar, but as a human being who struggled, stumbled, and ultimately found his way. By reflecting on his marriage to Renate, Elton sends a powerful message about the importance of honesty in relationships and the courage it takes to live authentically. He acknowledges the hurt he caused, but he also honors the woman who shared that painful chapter of his life. In addressing his ex-wife with respect and humility, he shows that even in the most painful memories, there is room for healing and forgiveness. Elton John's first marriage was a disaster, but it was also a turning point. It revealed the dangers of denying one's true self, the consequences of choices made under societal pressure, and the resilience it takes to confront the past. For Elton, reflecting on his time with Renate Blauel is not about reliving regret, but about acknowledging the truth, honoring her dignity, and sharing his journey with honesty. In the end, Elton John's life story is a reminder that even the brightest stars carry shadows. His disastrous first marriage is not just a cautionary tale of personal struggle, but also a testament to the power of authenticity, compassion, and the enduring possibility of redemption.